The morning mist clung to the razor wire surrounding Forward Operating Base Vanguard like a shroud, obscuring the Afghan mountains that loomed in the distance. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, her compact frame dwarfed by the towering concrete barriers that protected the compound. At 26 years old, she had already served 3 tours of duty, but to most of the soldiers around her, she remained invisible, a logistics specialist whose combat boots barely made a sound as she walked across the dusty courtyard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pre-dawn air carried the familiar sounds of a military base stirring to life. Generators hummed their mechanical lullaby while early risers emerged from their quarters, steel cups of coffee steaming in the cool mountain air. Maya adjusted her body armor for the 3rd time that morning, the heavy ceramic plates shifting awkwardly across her slight shoulders. The vest had been designed for larger frames, and despite the adjustable straps, it never quite fit properly. She had learned to compensate, cinching the waist tighter and padding the shoulders with extra fabric, but the constant reminder of her physical differences was always there. Through the canvas walls of the command tent, she could hear the booming voice of First Sergeant Robert Kane, discussing the day's patrol assignments with his squad leaders. Kane was a mountain of a man, standing 6 feet 4 inches with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. His voice carried the authority of 15 years in the infantry, and when he spoke, soldiers listened. Maya had requested to join patrol rotations dozens of times over the past 6 months, but Kane's response was always the same polite dismissal, wrapped in concerns about unit cohesion and specialized roles. Maya walked past the gleaming Humvees lined up near the motor pool, their armored hulls scarred by roadside bombs and small arms fire. Each vehicle told a story of survival in hostile territory, and she longed to be part of those stories rather than simply reading about them in after-action reports. Instead, her days were spent managing supply inventories, coordinating resupply convoys, and ensuring that ammunition and rations reached the forward positions. It was critical work, but it kept her safely inside the wire while others faced the dangers beyond the perimeter. At the far end of the compound, she spotted her assigned workspace, a modified shipping container that had been converted into a supply depot. The metal walls were painted olive drab, and the interior was cramped but organized with military precision. Shelves lined every available surface, stocked with everything from medical supplies to communications equipment. Maya had turned this small space into a model of efficiency, implementing tracking systems that reduced waste and improved response times for urgent requests. Sergeant First Class David Torres emerged from the container as she approached, his weathered face creased with the kind of smile that suggested good news. Torres was one of the few senior enlisted soldiers who treated Maya with genuine respect, recognizing her analytical mind and attention to detail. He had served as her supervisor for 8 months, and their working relationship had evolved into something approaching friendship, despite the difference in their ranks and experience levels. "Morning, Chun," Torres said, holding up a tablet, displaying inventory reports. The resupply convoy from Bagram arrived ahead of schedule. "Everything on your requisition list came through, including those upgraded optics you requested for 3rd Platoon." Maya felt a small surge of satisfaction as she scanned the delivery manifest. She had spent weeks researching equipment specifications and coordinating with multiple supply chains to secure the advanced rifle scopes that 3rd Platoon desperately needed. Their current optics were outdated and unreliable, contributing to decreased accuracy during long-range engagements. The new equipment would give them a significant tactical advantage, potentially saving lives in future firefights. "Outstanding work on the procurement," Torres continued, genuine appreciation evident in his voice. "Lieutenant Martinez specifically asked me to thank you. His boys have been struggling with target identification at extended ranges, and these new scopes should solve that problem. The compliment warmed Maya more than she cared to admit. Recognition for her contributions was rare, and most soldiers took the steady flow of supplies and equipment for granted. They saw the results of her work, but never connected those results to the person responsible for making them happen. She was the invisible machinery that kept the base functioning, noticed only when something went wrong or failed to arrive on schedule. As they entered the supply depot, Maya noticed Torres studying her with an expression she had seen before: part admiration, part frustration. She suspected he wanted to say something about her repeated requests for combat duty, but military protocol prevented him from openly questioning decisions made by senior leadership. Instead, he channeled his support into ensuring her current assignments were meaningful and challenging. "There's something else," Torres said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. Intelligence section has requested a comprehensive analysis of ammunition consumption patterns for the past 3 months. They're looking at logistics data to identify potential changes in enemy activity levels. I told them you were the person for the job. Maya's pulse quickened with interest. Analysis work that touched on tactical intelligence was exactly the kind of assignment she had been hoping for. A chance to contribute to operational planning rather than simply maintaining inventory levels. She had studied patterns and trends obsessively during her off-duty hours, developing theories about enemy behavior based on the supplies and equipment that flowed through her depot. "What kind of time frame are we looking at?" she asked, already mentally organizing the data sets she would need to examine. "They want preliminary findings by end of week, full report within 2 weeks. It's a big responsibility, Chun. This analysis could influence how we plan future operations." The weight of that responsibility settled on Maya's shoulders like a familiar burden. Throughout her military career, she had learned to excel at whatever task was given to her, hoping that exceptional performance would eventually lead to opportunities for greater challenges. She had earned expert ratings on every weapon system she was allowed to train with, completed advanced courses in tactics and leadership, and maintained physical fitness scores that exceeded standards despite her size disadvantage. Yet none of those achievements had translated into the combat role she desperately wanted. The unspoken assumption seemed to be that her physical limitations outweighed her other qualifications, that the infantry was no place for someone who looked like she belonged in a college classroom rather than a battlefield. Maya had grown tired of fighting against those assumptions, but she had never stopped preparing for the day when circumstances might finally give her a chance to prove them wrong. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm of routine tasks and administrative details. Maya reviewed requisitions, coordinated delivery schedules, and updated tracking systems while the sounds of military life continued around her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Helicopters thundered overhead, carrying supplies to remote outposts, and the distant crack of rifle fire echoed from the training ranges where soldiers honed their marksmanship skills. Around midday, the base's emergency alarm system jolted everyone into heightened alertness. The distinctive wail of sirens cut through the ambient noise, followed immediately by urgent announcements over the public address system. Maya looked up from her computer screen to see Torres rushing toward the command tent, his face grim with the kind of expression that meant serious trouble was developing somewhere beyond the wire. She followed him outside and joined the growing crowd of soldiers gathering near the communication center. The base's operations officer, Major Patricia Wells, stood on the steps addressing the assembled personnel with clipped, professional urgency. Wells was a career intelligence officer whose calm demeanor masked a sharp, analytical mind that had earned respect throughout the command structure. At approximately 11:30 hours, Outpost Phoenix came under heavy attack by an estimated platoon-sized enemy force, Wells announced. her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. Initial reports indicate sustained small arms and rocket-propelled grenade fire from multiple directions. Communication was lost 17 minutes ago, and attempts to re-establish contact have been unsuccessful. Maya felt her stomach clench, with anxiety as she processed the implications. Outpost Phoenix was a small forward position located in a strategic mountain pass about 20 kilometers northeast of their current location. The outpost was manned by approximately 30 soldiers, whose mission was to monitor enemy movement and provide early warning of potential attacks against larger installations. If Phoenix had gone silent, it meant those soldiers were either dead, captured, or fighting for their lives without hope of immediate reinforcement. A quick reaction force is being assembled for immediate deployment, Wells continued. First platoon will provide the primary assault element, with 2nd Platoon in support. Medical and explosive ordnance disposal teams are standing by for follow-on operations. All non-essential personnel will remain at current duty stations until further notice. The crowd began to disperse as soldiers hurried to their assigned positions, but Maya remained frozen in place, watching the controlled chaos of a military unit preparing for combat. She could see First Sergeant Kane barking orders at his squad leaders, while armored vehicles roared to life in the motor pool. Soldiers ran toward the arms room to draw additional ammunition and equipment, their faces set with the grim determination of professionals heading into danger. Maya wanted desperately to be part of that controlled chaos, to contribute something more meaningful than inventory management while her fellow soldiers risked their lives. She thought about the 30 men and women at Outpost Phoenix, wondering if any of them were people she had worked with or supplied equipment to over the past months. The idea that they might be dying while she remained safely behind concrete barriers filled her with a familiar frustration that had been building for years. Torres appeared at her elbow, his expression troubled. "This is bad, Chen. Phoenix is isolated terrain with limited escape routes. If they're really under sustained attack, the quick reaction force might be walking into a nightmare." Maya nodded, her mind already working through the tactical challenges facing the rescue mission. She had studied the terrain around Outpost Phoenix extensively as part of her logistics planning, analyzing supply routes and evacuation procedures for various scenarios. The outpost's strategic value came from its commanding view of the surrounding valleys, but that same elevation made it vulnerable to being surrounded and cut off from reinforcement. "How long until the QRF is ready to move?" she asked. 30 minutes, maybe less. Kane is pushing them hard to get rolling as soon as possible. Maya watched the organized chaos continuing around them, feeling increasingly helpless as critical decisions were made without her input. She knew she possessed valuable knowledge about the area around Phoenix, including detailed information about supply caches and alternative routes that might not be included in standard tactical maps. But there was no mechanism for her to share that information, no way for a logistics specialist to insert herself into operational planning led by infantry leaders. The sound of rotors filled the air as attack helicopters lifted off from the flight line, their weapons pylons loaded with rockets and machine gun pods. The aircraft disappeared into the hazy distance, racing toward the besieged outpost at maximum speed. Maya knew the helicopters would provide crucial fire support for any rescue attempt, but their fuel limitations meant they could only remain on station for a limited time before returning to refuel and rearm. As the immediate crisis response took shape around her, Maya found herself thinking about the countless hours she had spent studying military history and tactics during her off-duty time. She had read extensively about small unit operations, asymmetric warfare, and the kind of mountain fighting that defined much of the conflict in Afghanistan. That knowledge felt useless now, trapped inside someone whose primary contribution to the war effort was ensuring adequate supplies of toilet paper and cleaning products. The irony was not lost on her that while she memorized the specifications of every weapon system used by their unit, she was considered too small and weak to actually employ those weapons in combat. While she studied tactical manuals and practiced combat scenarios in her mind, other soldiers dismissed her as someone better suited to administrative duties behind a desk. The gulf between her capabilities and the role she was allowed to perform had never felt wider than it did at this moment. Major Wells reappeared on the command tent steps, this time accompanied by several senior officers whose presence indicated the seriousness of the developing situation. Maya recognized Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, the base commander, whose normally composed demeanor showed signs of strain as he consulted with his staff officers. Harrison was a career infantry officer with multiple combat deployments, and his reputation for decisive leadership had earned him respect throughout the brigade. Latest intelligence indicates the attack on Phoenix was likely a diversionary action, Wells announced to the remaining personnel. Enemy forces may be positioning for a larger assault against this installation or other targets in the area. All personnel will remain at heightened alert status until further notice. Security teams will implement enhanced perimeter patrols immediately. The announcement sent a new wave of tension through the assembled soldiers. Maya realized that while everyone's attention was focused on the crisis at Outpost Phoenix, enemy forces might be using that distraction to position themselves for attacks elsewhere. The tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex, with multiple threats developing simultaneously across a wide geographic area. Torres moved closer to Maya, his voice lowered to avoid being overheard by nearby soldiers. "Chen, I need you to secure all sensitive equipment and prepare for possible base evacuation. If this situation deteriorates, we might need to move critical supplies to alternate locations on short notice." The request struck Maya as both essential and frustrating. Once again, her role was to manage logistics while others handled the actual fighting. She understood the importance of protecting valuable equipment and supplies, but part of her wondered if her time might be better spent contributing to the tactical response rather than preparing for retreat. "Roger that, Sergeant. I'll start with the communications equipment and work down the priority list." As Maya headed back toward the supply depot, she could hear the distant rumble of armored vehicles departing the base. The Quick Reaction Force was finally rolling toward Outpost Phoenix, carrying the hopes and prayers of everyone left behind. She paused to watch the convoy disappear through the main gate, wondering how many of those soldiers would return and what condition they would be in when they did. The next several hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation and agonizing uncertainty. Maya worked methodically through her assigned tasks, securing equipment and updating inventory records while monitoring radio traffic for any news from the rescue mission. The communications center maintained a steady stream of reports and updates, but much of the information was fragmented and difficult to interpret from her position outside the operational chain. By late afternoon, the first concrete news finally arrived through official channels. The Quick Reaction Force had reached the vicinity of Outpost Phoenix and established contact with survivors, but the tactical situation remained extremely dangerous. Enemy forces had indeed surrounded the outpost and were using the high ground to maintain effective fire on any rescue attempts. Several members of the QRF had already been wounded, and the mission was evolving into a prolonged firefight rather than a quick extraction. Maya absorbed this information with growing anxiety and frustration. She could visualize the terrain around Phoenix based on her extensive study of supply routes and topographic maps, and she suspected the rescue force was encountering exactly the kind of challenges she might have anticipated if anyone had thought to consult her. The outpost's elevated position provided excellent defensive fields of fire, but it also created natural choke points that enemy forces could exploit to trap attackers in kill zones. As evening approached, Maya found herself alone in the supply depot, surrounded by carefully organized equipment that suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the life and death struggle taking place 20 kilometers away. She had completed all of her assigned tasks hours earlier, but there was nothing else for her to do except wait for updates and hope that her fellow soldiers would somehow find a way to extract themselves from an increasingly desperate situation. The irony of her situation was almost overwhelming. She possessed knowledge and skills that might be valuable in resolving the crisis, but the military's rigid hierarchical structure prevented her from contributing anything beyond her designated logistical role. She was like a surgeon forced to work as a janitor while patients bled to death in the next room, watching helplessly as others struggled with problems she might be able to solve. Torres appeared in the depot doorway as the sun began to set behind the surrounding mountains, his face haggard with exhaustion and worry. Maya could see immediately that he carried bad news, the kind of information that would make an already difficult situation even worse. "The QRF is pinned down about 2 clicks short of Phoenix," he said without preamble. "Enemy forces have established overlapping fields of fire that make any advance extremely costly. We've got multiple casualties and limited ammunition remaining." Maya felt her heart sink as she processed the implications. If the rescue force was trapped short of their objective, the survivors at Outpost Phoenix would be forced to continue fighting without hope of immediate relief. Meanwhile, the QRF itself was at risk of being overrun if enemy reinforcements arrived or if they exhausted their remaining ammunition. What about air support? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The helicopters have been grounded due to technical problems and enemy anti-aircraft fire. Fixed-wing support is unavailable due to weather conditions in the mountains. For the immediate future, our people are on their own. Maya stared at the equipment surrounding her, wondering if any of it could make a difference in the desperate situation developing beyond the base perimeter. She thought about the advanced optics she had procured for 3rd Platoon, the night vision devices stored in secured containers, and the various pieces of specialized gear that might give friendly forces some tactical advantage. But none of that equipment would matter if there was no way to deliver it to the soldiers who needed it most. "There has to be something we can do," she said, more to herself than to Torres. Torres studied her with an expression that mixed sympathy with resignation. "Chun, I know this is frustrating. I know you want to do more than manage supplies while other people fight. But the reality is that your skills are needed here, keeping this base operational and ready for whatever comes next." The well-intentioned words felt like salt in an open wound. Maya had heard similar reassurances countless times over the past 3 years, always delivered by well-meaning supervisors who seemed to believe that logistical work was somehow equivalent to combat duty in terms of personal fulfillment and professional development. They failed to understand that her desire for combat assignment wasn't about glory or excitement, but about using her full range of capabilities in service of something larger than herself. As night fell over Forward Operating Base Vanguard, Maya remained in the supply depot long after her duty hours had officially ended. She found herself studying detailed maps of the area around Outpost Phoenix, tracing potential routes and analyzing terrain features that might offer tactical opportunities. It was an academic exercise with no practical application, but it helped her feel slightly more connected to the crisis unfolding in the darkness beyond the wire. The base settled into its nighttime routine, with enhanced security patrols moving quietly through the shadows and communications personnel maintaining round-the-clock contact with higher headquarters. Maya could hear occasional radio chatter filtering through the walls, fragmentary reports that suggested the situation at Phoenix remained critical but stable. The survivors were holding their positions, but ammunition and medical supplies were running dangerously low. Around midnight, Torres returned to check on her progress with equipment security procedures. He found Maya hunched over a map table, surrounded by topographic charts and tactical overlays that she had assembled from various sources. Her analysis covered every aspect of the terrain around Outpost Phoenix, including elevation profiles, vegetation patterns, and potential cover and concealment opportunities. "Chun, what are you doing?" Torres asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Maya looked up from her work, her eyes bright with the kind of focused intensity that came from hours of concentrated analysis. "I've been studying the tactical situation around Phoenix. I think there might be an approach route that the QRF hasn't considered, something that could get them close enough to establish effective fire support." Torres moved closer to examine her work, his expression shifting from concern to genuine interest as he recognized the quality and detail of her analysis. Maya had identified several terrain features that offered potential covered approaches to the besieged outpost, including a series of natural defiles that might allow small units to move undetected through enemy positions. "This is impressive work," Torres admitted, "but you know there's no way to get this information to the people who need it. The chain of command doesn't exactly encourage tactical input from logistics specialists." Maya felt the familiar frustration building in her chest, the same helpless anger that had been her constant companion throughout her military career. She possessed knowledge and insights that might save lives, but the rigid structures of military hierarchy prevented her from sharing that knowledge with decision-makers who could act on it. "Then maybe it's time to change how the chain of command works," she said quietly. Torres stared at her with alarm, recognizing the dangerous edge in her voice. "Chun, whatever you're thinking, don't do it. I've seen good soldiers destroy their careers by going around proper channels, even when they had the best intentions." Maya returned her attention to the maps spread across the table, her mind working through possibilities and consequences with the same methodical precision she applied to logistics planning. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the base perimeter, soldiers were fighting for their lives while she sat safely behind concrete barriers with knowledge that might help them survive. The disconnect between her capabilities and her authorized role had never felt more stark or more morally intolerable. "Torres," she said without looking up from her analysis, "what would you do if you knew you could make a difference, but nobody would listen to you?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge, forcing Torres to confront his own frustrations with a system that often prioritized procedures over results. Maya could see him struggling with the competing demands of loyalty to regulations and loyalty to soldiers in danger. "I'd probably do something stupid and regret it for the rest of my career," he admitted finally. Maya smiled grimly, understanding that Torres had just given her both a warning and a form of permission. She continued studying her maps and analysis, knowing that within the next few hours she would have to make a decision that could define the rest of her military career and possibly her life. The base remained on high alert throughout the night, with periodic updates confirming that the tactical situation remained unchanged. The survivors at Outpost Phoenix continued to hold their positions, but their ammunition and supplies were nearly exhausted. The quick reaction force remained pinned down short of their objective, unable to advance without suffering casualties they could not afford. As dawn approached, Maya found herself at a crossroads that felt both inevitable and terrifying. She could continue following orders and maintaining her assigned role while other soldiers died in situations her knowledge might help resolve. Or she could take action that would almost certainly end her military career, but might save lives that would otherwise be lost to bureaucratic inflexibility. Maya Chen had spent her entire adult life preparing for moments like this, training her mind and body for challenges that the system insisted she was too small and weak to handle. Now faced with a crisis that demanded exactly the kind of skills and knowledge she possessed, she had to decide whether to accept the limitations others had placed on her or to prove once and for all that size and gender were irrelevant when lives hung in the balance. The forgotten soldier was about to step out of the shadows and into a fight that would change everything. The first light of dawn crept across the Afghan mountains like spilled blood, painting the rocky peaks in shades of crimson and gold. Maya Chen stood in the pre-dawn darkness outside the supply depot, her breath forming small clouds in the cold mountain air. She had made her decision during the long hours of the night, and now there was no turning back. The weight of her chosen course settled on her shoulders like body armor, heavy but familiar. Inside her cargo pocket, folded with military precision, lay a detailed tactical analysis she had spent hours preparing. The document contained everything she knew about the terrain around Outpost Phoenix, including approach routes, defensive positions, and tactical recommendations that could potentially save the lives of soldiers trapped in an impossible situation. More importantly, it contained her formal request to join the rescue mission as a tactical advisor. Maya understood that what she was about to do violated every protocol in the military handbook. Logistics specialists did not insert themselves into operational planning. Junior enlisted soldiers did not bypass the chain of command to offer tactical advice to senior officers. Women of her size and stature did not volunteer for combat missions that had already claimed multiple casualties among larger, more experienced male soldiers. But Maya also understood that following those protocols meant watching helplessly while soldiers died in a situation her knowledge might help resolve. The moral calculus was simple, even if the professional consequences would be devastating. She had spent years preparing for a moment like this, training her mind and body for challenges the system insisted she was incapable of handling. Now that moment had arrived, and she would not let it pass unused. The command tent blazed with harsh fluorescent light as Maya approached through the gathering dawn. Inside, she could see the silhouettes of senior officers hunched over tactical displays and communication equipment. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison moved between workstations with the controlled urgency of a commander, managing multiple crises simultaneously. Major Wells stood at a large map table, pointing to various positions while speaking rapidly into a field telephone. Maya paused outside the tent entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs as she rehearsed the words she had practiced throughout the sleepless night. There would be no second chance for this conversation, no opportunity to revise her approach if the initial presentation failed to convince skeptical leadership. Everything depended on the next few minutes and her ability to articulate why. Logistics specialists should be trusted with tactical decisions that could determine the outcome of a life-or-death situation. She pushed through the canvas flap and stepped into the organized chaos of the command center. Conversations paused momentarily as officers noticed her unexpected presence, their expressions ranging from surprise to irritation at the interruption. Maya could feel the weight of their collective gaze as she moved toward the map table where Lieutenant Colonel Harrison was studying aerial photographs of the Phoenix area. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Harrison said, his voice carrying the weary patience of a commander dealing with countless urgent demands on his attention. "Unless this concerns critical supply shortages, now is not the time for administrative matters." Maya straightened to attention, her compact frame rigid with military bearing despite the tremor of nervousness running through her muscles. "Sir, I'm here to volunteer for the Phoenix rescue mission. I have tactical intelligence that could be crucial to mission success." The statement fell into the tent like a live grenade, creating a moment of stunned silence before erupting into a cacophony of objections and disbelief. First Sergeant Kane stepped forward from his position near the communication station, his massive frame towering over Maya as his face flushed with indignation. "Sergeant Chen, you are way out of line," Kane's voice boomed through the tent. "This is a combat operation, not a supply run. You need to return to your assigned duties immediately." Major Wells looked up from her telephone conversation, her expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance at the unexpected disruption. "Staff Sergeant, what exactly do you think you're doing? This is an operational planning session for qualified infantry personnel only." Maya felt the familiar sting of dismissal, the same casual rejection she had encountered countless times throughout her military career. But this time lives hung in the balance, and she refused to be brushed aside without being heard. She reached into her cargo pocket and withdrew the tactical analysis she had prepared, unfolding it with steady hands despite the hostile attention focused on her. "Sir, with respect, I have critical information about terrain and approach routes. That isn't included in your current planning materials," she said, addressing Lieutenant Colonel Harrison directly. "I've been studying the Phoenix area for months as part of logistics planning, and I've identified potential covered approaches that could allow the rescue force to reach the outpost without exposing themselves to the enemy positions that have them pinned down." Harrison's eyes narrowed as he studied Maya's determined expression, clearly struggling to reconcile her unexpected presence with his understanding of military protocol and appropriate channels of communication. Around the tent, other officers waited for his response, their body language suggesting that they expected him to dismiss her quickly and return to more pressing matters. "Sergeant Chen," Harrison said slowly, "your dedication is noted, but tactical planning is the responsibility of trained infantry officers. I'm sure your logistics expertise is valuable in its proper context, but this situation requires different skills." Maya stepped forward and placed her analysis on the map table, spreading it out beside the official tactical overlays that dominated the workspace. Her hand-drawn charts showed incredible detail, including elevation contours, vegetation patterns, and potential cover positions that seemed to have been overlooked by the standard military maps. "Sir, this analysis shows 3 possible approach routes that could get the rescue force within effective range of Phoenix without crossing the kill zones that have them trapped," Maya said, her voice growing stronger as she focused on the technical aspects of her presentation. Route Alpha follows a natural ravine system that provides concealment from the elevated enemy positions. Route Bravo uses a series of rock formations to mask movement until the final assault phase. Route Charlie is more dangerous but could allow a small force to establish overwatch positions behind enemy lines. The tent fell silent as the assembled officers studied Maya's work, their expressions shifting from skepticism to grudging interest as they recognized the quality and detail of her analysis. Major Wells set down her telephone and moved closer to the map table, tracing the routes Maya had identified with a manicured finger. "This level of terrain analysis is quite sophisticated," Wells admitted, though her voice carried a note of surprise that such work had come from a logistics specialist. "Where did you acquire this information, Sergeant?" Maya felt a surge of confidence as she realized that her preparation was finally being taken seriously. "Ma'am, I've been conducting detailed studies of all areas within our operational radius as part of contingency planning for supply and evacuation routes. I've also been monitoring weather patterns, soil conditions, and seasonal changes that could affect movement through different terrain types." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison leaned over the map table, studying Maya's analysis with the focused attention of a professional soldier evaluating tactical options. Maya could see his mind working through the implications of her proposed routes, weighing potential advantages against the risks of deviating from established plans. "Even if your terrain analysis is accurate," Harrison said finally, "this mission requires combat-experienced personnel who can function under extreme stress. You're a logistics specialist, Sergeant. Your training and experience don't qualify you for this type of operation." Maya had anticipated this objection and prepared her response during the long hours of the night. "Sir, I understand your concerns about my qualifications, but I have expert ratings on every weapon system in our inventory, including specialized equipment that might be needed for this mission. I've completed advanced courses in small unit tactics, combat medical training, and communications procedures. My physical fitness scores exceed standards in every category despite my size." First Sergeant Kane interrupted with barely concealed hostility. "Sergeant Chen, qualifying on weapons at a firing range is completely different from using those weapons in combat. You've never been in a firefight. You don't know how you'll react when people are shooting back at you." The accusation struck at Maya's deepest insecurity, the question that had haunted her throughout her military career. She had trained extensively for combat situations, but Kane was right that she had never faced the ultimate test of actual battle. Everything she knew about combat came from training exercises, academic study, and second-hand accounts from soldiers who had experienced the real thing. "You're absolutely right, First Sergeant," Maya said, her voice steady despite the admission. "I haven't been in combat before. But neither had any of you until your first firefight. Everyone has to start somewhere, and someone has to take a chance on unproven soldiers, or we'd never develop new combat leaders." Major Wells stepped back from the map table, her expression thoughtful as she considered Maya's argument. "Sergeant, even assuming your tactical analysis has merit, what exactly are you proposing? That we send you along as an advisor? That we allow you to guide the rescue mission? What specific role would you play?" Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine whether she received an opportunity to prove herself or faced immediate dismissal and possible disciplinary action. "Ma'am, I'm proposing to lead a small reconnaissance element that would use one of these alternate routes to establish overwatch positions and provide intelligence on enemy dispositions. A 2- or 3-person team could move faster and more quietly than a larger force, and we could provide targeting information for the main assault." The suggestion created another moment of stunned silence, followed by an explosion of objections from multiple officers speaking simultaneously. Kane's voice rose above the others as he stepped closer to Maya, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. "Absolutely not," he declared. "Sergeant Chen, you are talking about a suicide mission. The terrain around Phoenix is crawling with enemy fighters who have already proven they can defeat larger, better-equipped forces. Sending an inexperienced soldier into that environment would be criminally negligent." Maya stood her ground despite Kane's intimidating presence, her chin raised defiantly as she met his hostile stare. "First Sergeant, with respect, the current approach isn't working. The rescue force has been pinned down for hours with mounting casualties and dwindling ammunition. At some point, we have to try something different, or we're going to lose everyone." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison raised his hand to silence the growing argument, his authoritative gesture immediately restoring order to the chaotic tent. Maya could see him weighing multiple factors as he studied her analysis and considered the deteriorating situation at Phoenix. The burden of command showed in his weathered features as he grappled with decisions that could determine the fate of dozens of soldiers. "Sergeant Chen," Harrison said slowly, "your tactical analysis shows impressive knowledge and attention to detail. However, what you're proposing goes far beyond your authorized role and experience level. I cannot in good conscience send an untested soldier into a combat situation that has already claimed multiple casualties among seasoned infantry troops." Maya felt her opportunity slipping away like sand through her fingers, the familiar pattern of dismissal and marginalization reasserting itself despite her best efforts to break through institutional barriers. But before she could formulate a response, the tense communication equipment crackled with an urgent transmission that demanded everyone's immediate attention. "Command, this is QRF Leader," came the strained voice of Captain Bradley Morrison, who was leading the rescue force. "Trapped near Phoenix. Situation is deteriorating rapidly. We've got multiple wounded who need immediate medical evacuation, and our ammunition is down to less than 20%. Enemy forces appear to be massing for a final assault on our position." The transmission sent a new wave of urgency through the command tent as officers realized that the tactical situation was approaching a critical decision point. Maya could see the weight of responsibility settling on Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's shoulders as he faced the possibility of losing not only the Phoenix garrison, but the rescue force as well. Major Wells grabbed the radio handset and responded with professional calm despite the obvious stress in her voice. "QRF Leader, this is Command. What is your assessment of enemy strength and disposition? Do you have options for movement to alternate positions? Morrison's reply came through crackling static, the sound of distant gunfire audible in the background. Command: enemy strength is estimated at 40 to 50 fighters positioned in elevated positions, with excellent fields of fire. Any movement from our current position would expose us to devastating crossfire. We need immediate support, or we're going to be overrun within the next few hours. Maya listened to the exchange with growing desperation, knowing that her analysis might provide solutions to the tactical problems that had the rescue force trapped. She thought about the soldiers fighting for their lives in terrain she had studied meticulously, facing challenges that her knowledge might help them overcome. The disconnect between her capabilities and her authorized role had never felt more morally intolerable. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison set down the radio handset and turned to address his staff with the grim determination of a commander facing impossible choices. Gentlemen, we need options immediately. The current plan isn't working, and we're running out of time to extract our people before the situation becomes completely untenable. Maya seized the moment of uncertainty to press her case one final time. Sir, my analysis identifies covered approaches that could allow small teams to establish supporting positions without alerting enemy forces. A reconnaissance element could provide targeting information and create opportunities for the main rescue force to advance. Kane stepped forward again, his voice tight with frustration. Colonel, we cannot seriously be considering sending a logistics specialist into that meat grinder. If Sergeant Chen gets herself killed, we'll have failed in our responsibility to keep our soldiers safe while accomplishing nothing meaningful. And if we do nothing, Maya shot back, how many soldiers are going to die while we debate qualifications and protocols? At what point does following proper procedures become more important than saving lives? The challenge hung in the air like an accusation, forcing everyone in the tent to confront the uncomfortable truth that bureaucratic caution might cost lives that could potentially be saved through bold action. Maya could see the internal struggle playing out across Harrison's features as he weighed competing responsibilities and tried to find a path forward that balanced risk against potential gain. Major Wells moved closer to the map table and studied Maya's analysis with renewed intensity, her trained intelligence officer's mind evaluating the tactical possibilities presented by the alternate routes. Colonel, these approach routes do offer potential advantages that we haven't fully explored. Route Alpha in particular could allow a small element to reach overwatch positions without crossing known enemy positions. Maya felt a spark of hope as she realized that at least one senior officer was taking her analysis seriously enough to consider its tactical implications. She pressed her advantage by highlighting specific features of her proposed routes, explaining how terrain and vegetation could provide concealment for carefully planned movements. The key advantage of Route Alpha is that it follows natural drainage patterns that create dead space from the elevated enemy positions, Maya explained, pointing to specific contours on her hand-drawn map. A small team could move through this ravine system and establish observation posts that would provide intelligence on enemy positions while remaining undetected. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison studied the route Maya had identified, his experienced eye evaluating the tactical possibilities against the risks of sending inexperienced personnel into active combat. Maya could see him struggling with the fundamental question of whether the potential intelligence value justified exposing additional soldiers to mortal danger. Even assuming your route analysis is accurate, Harrison said, who would lead such a reconnaissance mission? We don't have experienced personnel available for this type of specialized operation. Maya straightened to her full height, her compact frame radiating determination, despite the nervous energy coursing through her system. Sir, I volunteer to lead the reconnaissance element. I know this terrain better than anyone else on the base, and I have the technical skills necessary to provide accurate intelligence reporting. The declaration triggered another round of objections from the assembled officers, but Maya pressed forward before anyone could silence her. "Sir, I understand this is unconventional, but conventional approaches have failed to resolve this crisis. Sometimes extraordinary situations require extraordinary measures." First Sergeant Kane stepped between Maya and the map table, his imposing presence intended to end the discussion through sheer physical intimidation. "Sergeant Chen, you are way out of line. This conversation is over. Report to your quarters immediately and await further instructions." But Lieutenant Colonel Harrison raised his hand again, his gesture indicating that he wanted to hear more before making a final decision. Maya could see the wheels turning in his mind as he evaluated options that ranged from unpalatable to catastrophic, searching for any approach that might break the tactical stalemate that threatened to destroy both Phoenix and the rescue force. "Sergeant Chen," Harrison said slowly, "explain to me exactly how this reconnaissance mission would work. What specific intelligence would you gather, and how would that information be used to support the main rescue operation?" Maya felt her pulse quicken as she realized she was being given a genuine opportunity to present her plan rather than being dismissed out of hand. She moved closer to the map table and began explaining her tactical concept with the precision of someone who had spent hours thinking through every detail. "Sir, the primary objective would be to establish observation posts that provide real-time intelligence on enemy positions, movements, and intentions. Secondary objectives would include identifying weaknesses in enemy defenses and opportunities for the main force to advance. The reconnaissance element would remain in position to provide overwatch and targeting support during the final assault phase." Major Wells nodded thoughtfully as she followed Maya's explanation, her intelligence background allowing her to appreciate the potential value of the proposed mission. "The intelligence aspect is merit, Colonel. We're currently operating with limited information about enemy dispositions and capabilities. Better intelligence could significantly improve our chances of mission success." Maya could sense the mood in the tent shifting slightly as senior officers began to consider her proposal on its tactical merits rather than dismissing it based on her rank and specialization. She pressed her advantage by addressing the obvious concerns about her lack of combat experience. "Sir, I understand that my inexperience is a significant risk factor, but I also believe that my knowledge of this specific terrain and my analytical background provide unique advantages for this type of mission. I've studied every square meter of the approach routes, and I know exactly where to position observation posts for maximum effectiveness." Kane shook his head vigorously, his opposition remaining absolute despite the growing interest from other officers. "Colonel, this is insanity. We're talking about sending a soldier with no combat experience into the most dangerous tactical situation we've faced in months. If something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, we'll have needlessly sacrificed a valuable member of our team." Maya felt frustration building in her chest as Kane's objections threatened to derail her opportunity before it fully developed. She understood his concerns about her safety, but she also believed that those concerns were rooted more in assumptions about her capabilities than an objective assessment of mission requirements. "First Sergeant," she said, her voice carrying a new edge of determination, "I appreciate your concern for my safety. But with respect, the soldiers at Phoenix and in the rescue force are facing exactly the same risks I would be taking on. Why is their safety less important than mine? Why is their experience more valuable than the potential intelligence that could save all of them?" The question struck at the heart of Kane's position, forcing him to articulate why Maya's life was more valuable than the lives of soldiers already committed to the mission. Maya could see him struggling with the logical inconsistency of his argument, the difficulty of explaining why protecting one untested soldier was more important than potentially saving dozens of experienced fighters. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison stepped closer to the map table and studied Maya's analysis with the focused intensity of a commander making a critical decision. Maya held her breath as she watched him evaluate routes, consider tactical possibilities, and weigh the competing demands of mission success against personnel safety. "Sergeant Chen," Harrison said finally, "if I were to authorize this mission, who would you recommend as your team members? This type of operation requires absolute trust and coordination between team members." Maya felt her heart skip as she realized that Harrison was seriously considering her proposal rather than rejecting it outright. The question about team composition indicated that he was thinking through practical implementation details rather than focusing on reasons why the Kofa mission couldn't work. "Sir, I would recommend Specialist Jennifer Martinez from 3rd Platoon and Corporal David Kim from the Communications Section. Martinez has excellent marksmanship skills, and Kim has the technical expertise needed for real-time intelligence reporting. Both have expressed interest in more challenging assignments." Major Wells looked up from her own study of the tactical situation, her expression thoughtful as she considered the personnel Maya had suggested. Both Martinez and Kim have excellent service records and advanced training that would be relevant to this mission. From a capability standpoint, it's actually a well-balanced team. Maya could sense that momentum was building in favor of her proposal, but she also knew that First Sergeant Kane remained opposed and that his influence with Lieutenant Colonel Harrison was considerable. She needed to address his concerns directly rather than allowing them to undermine support for the mission. "First Sergeant," she said, turning to face Kane directly, "I understand that you see me as inexperienced and unsuited for combat operations. But I also know that you've seen soldiers rise to challenges that nobody expected them to handle. Sometimes the only way to test someone's capabilities is to give them the opportunity to prove themselves." Kane's expression softened slightly as he recognized the sincerity in Maya's voice, though his fundamental opposition remained unchanged. "Sergeant Chen, this isn't about proving yourself or advancing your career. This is about life and death. Decisions that could determine whether dozens of soldiers make it home to their families." Maya nodded, acknowledging the weight of Kane's concerns while maintaining her conviction that the mission was both necessary and achievable. "You're absolutely right, First Sergeant. This is about life and death. And right now, soldiers are dying while we debate whether someone with my background is qualified to help them. At what point do we stop talking and start acting?" Lieutenant Colonel Harrison looked around the tent at his assembled staff, reading their expressions and gauging their level of support for Maya's unconventional proposal. Maya could see him weighing multiple factors as he approached the moment of decision, calculating risks and potential benefits with the methodical precision of an experienced combat leader. "Gentlemen," Harrison said slowly, "we're facing a tactical situation that has resisted conventional solutions. The rescue force is pinned down with mounting casualties. Phoenix is running out of ammunition and medical supplies, and time is working against us in every respect. Under these circumstances, I'm willing to consider unconventional approaches that might break the stalemate." Maya felt a surge of anticipation mixed with terror as she realized that Harrison was moving toward approval of her mission. Everything she had trained for and dreamed about was suddenly within reach. But the reality of facing actual combat was both thrilling and terrifying in ways she had never fully anticipated. Kane made one final attempt to dissuade his commander, his voice carrying the weight of years of experience and hard-earned wisdom. "Colonel, I understand the pressure you're facing and the need to try something different. But sending inexperienced personnel into this situation could make everything worse. If the reconnaissance team gets compromised, we could lose them and still fail to help the people we're trying to save." Harrison nodded slowly, acknowledging Kane's concerns while maintaining focus on the larger tactical picture. "First Sergeant, your objections are noted and I share many of your concerns. However, the current situation is unacceptable and getting worse by the hour. We need intelligence on enemy positions, and conventional reconnaissance methods have proven inadequate. Maya seized what she sensed might be her final opportunity to influence the decision. "Sir, I'm not asking for a combat assignment based on wishful thinking or personal ambition. I'm offering specific capabilities that could contribute to mission success. My terrain analysis has identified opportunities that haven't been exploited, and my technical skills could provide intelligence that might save lives." Major Wells moved closer to Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, her voice lowered but still audible to everyone in the tent. "Colonel, from an intelligence perspective, the potential value of this mission is significant. We desperately need current information about enemy dispositions and capabilities. If Sergeant Chen's team can provide that intelligence, it could change the entire tactical dynamic." Harrison studied Maya's face with the intensity of a commander, trying to read the character and determination of someone whose life he was about to place in extreme danger. Maya met his gaze steadily, hoping that her expression conveyed the seriousness of her commitment and her understanding of the risks she was volunteering to accept. "Sergeant Chen," Harrison said finally, "if I authorize this mission, I need absolute assurance that you understand what you're volunteering for. This isn't a training exercise or a proving ground for personal advancement. People will be shooting at you with the intent to kill you. Are you prepared for that reality?" Maya felt the weight of the question settle on her shoulders like a physical burden. Everything in her military career had led to this moment, the opportunity to finally prove that her size and gender were irrelevant when measured against her skills and determination. But Harrison was right that the theoretical understanding of combat was completely different from the reality of facing enemies who wanted to kill her. "Sir," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was accepting, "I've been preparing for this my entire military career. I understand the risks, and I'm ready to accept them in service of the mission and the soldiers who are counting on us." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison studied Maya for another long moment, then turned to address his staff with the finality of a commander making an irrevocable decision. "Gentlemen, I'm authorizing a 3-person reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence on enemy positions around Outpost Phoenix. Staff Sergeant Chen will lead the team, with Specialist Martinez and Corporal Kim as supporting members." The authorization sent a shockwave through the tent as officers realized that Maya's unconventional proposal had been approved despite significant opposition from senior leadership. Maya felt a mixture of elation and terror as the reality of her situation crystallized, understanding that she had finally received the opportunity she had dreamed of while also accepting responsibility for a mission that could easily result in her death. First Sergeant Kane stepped forward one final time, his expression grim with resignation and concern. "Colonel, if you're determined to proceed with this mission, I want to ensure that Sergeant Chen and her team have every possible advantage. I'll personally oversee their equipment selection and final briefing." Maya felt a surge of gratitude toward Kane, despite his earlier opposition, recognizing that his concerns had been rooted in genuine care for her safety, rather than malicious intent to limit her opportunities. His offer to support the mission, despite his reservations, showed the kind of professional integrity that defined the best military leaders. "Thank you, First Sergeant," Maya said sincerely. "I know you have concerns about this mission, and I appreciate your willingness to help us succeed despite those reservations." Kane nodded grimly, his weathered features showing the strain of accepting a decision he fundamentally disagreed with. "Sergeant Chen, my job is to keep soldiers alive and mission-ready, regardless of my personal opinions about their assignments. If you're going on this mission, you're going with the best equipment and preparation we can provide." "Lieutenant Colonel." Harrison moved to the communication station and picked up the radio handset, preparing to notify the trapped rescue force that help was coming through an unconventional approach. Maya listened as he composed the message that would set her mission in motion, knowing that within hours she would be moving through enemy territory with the lives of dozens of soldiers, depending on her ability to gather accurate intelligence. "QRF Leader, this is Command," Harrison spoke into the radio. Relief mission is being organized using alternate approach routes. Reconnaissance element will be inserted to provide overwatch and intelligence support. Maintain current positions and prepare for coordinated assault within 6 hours. Morrison's response crackled through the static, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and desperation. Command, understood. We'll hold position and await coordination for final assault. Please advise reconnaissance element that enemy activity has increased significantly in the past hour. Maya absorbed this final piece of intelligence with the focused attention of someone whose life might depend on understanding every nuance of the tactical situation. The mission she had fought so hard to join was becoming more dangerous by the hour, but she was finally getting the chance to prove that her expertise and determination mattered, more than the physical and social barriers that had held her back. For years, the forgotten soldier was about to step into the spotlight of combat, carrying with her the hopes and fears of everyone who had ever been told they were too small, too weak, or too different to make a meaningful contribution when it mattered most. The ammunition weighed heavy in Maya's pack as she crouched in the shadow of a boulder formation, 3 kilometers from Outpost Phoenix. Specialist Jennifer Martinez lay prone beside her, adjusting the scope on her M24 sniper rifle while scanning the ridgeline ahead through her optics. Corporal David Kim worked quietly with his communications equipment, establishing secure contact with the command center while monitoring enemy radio frequencies for intelligence. Maya checked her watch, noting that they had been moving for nearly 4 hours through terrain that would have been challenging even without the constant threat of enemy contact. Her body ached from the sustained physical exertion of carrying full combat equipment across rough mountain terrain, but her mind remained focused on the tactical situation developing around them. Every shadow could conceal an enemy fighter. Every sound could signal the approach of hostile forces. The landscape around them told the story of ongoing conflict with brutal clarity. Shell craters dotted the mountainside where artillery rounds had impacted during previous engagements. Abandoned fighting positions showed where soldiers had dug in for defensive battles that ended in retreat or death. Maya counted at least 6 destroyed vehicles along the route they had taken, their twisted metal frames serving as monuments to the violence that had consumed this region. Martinez lowered her rifle and turned toward Maya, her voice barely above a whisper. Contact bearing 270 degrees, approximately 800 meters. I count 4 enemy fighters moving along the ridgeline in tactical formation. Maya raised her binoculars and studied the area Martinez had indicated, focusing on movement patterns and equipment configurations that might reveal enemy intentions. Through the magnified optics, she could see armed figures moving with the disciplined coordination of experienced fighters rather than the random movement of civilians or irregular militia. Confirmed visual on 4 hostile personnel, Maya whispered into her radio microphone. They appear to be conducting reconnaissance of the valley floor, possibly looking for our rescue force positions. Kim looked up from his communications equipment, his expression tense with concentration. I'm intercepting radio chatter on enemy frequencies. They're reporting movement in the valley and requesting instructions from a command element. Sounds like they've detected something, but haven't identified specific targets yet. Maya processed this information while continuing to observe enemy movements through her binoculars. The tactical picture was becoming clearer as she gathered intelligence on hostile positions and capabilities. The enemy forces were more organized and better equipped than initial reports had suggested, with sophisticated communication networks and coordinated reconnaissance operations. Martinez, can you get a clear shot on the radio operator? Maya asked, knowing that disrupting enemy communications could provide significant tactical advantages for the overall rescue mission. Martinez adjusted her position slightly and peered through her rifle scope, evaluating the shot angle and environmental conditions that would affect bullet trajectory. Negative, the angle is wrong and there's too much vegetation for a clean shot. I'd need them to move about 50 meters closer to guarantee a hit. Maya studied the terrain between their position and the enemy patrol, looking for opportunities to maneuver closer while maintaining concealment. The rocky landscape offered numerous hiding places, but any movement would risk exposure to observation from elevated positions. She weighed the potential intelligence value of eliminating the enemy patrol against the risk of compromising their own mission. "Kim, what's the status on our communication link with the rescue force?" Maya asked. "Strong signal, clear reception. QRF leader is requesting immediate intelligence on enemy positions, blocking their advance routes." Maya made her decision with the cold calculation of someone whose training had prepared her for exactly this type of tactical situation. "We're going to move closer to that patrol and gather detailed intelligence on their equipment and procedures. Martinez, you'll provide overwatch while Kim and I advance to a forward observation position." Martinez nodded grimly, understanding that the proposed movement would place Maya and Kim in extreme danger while leaving her alone to provide covering fire if the situation deteriorated. "Roger that. I'll maintain visual contact and be ready to engage if you're compromised." Maya checked her equipment one final time, ensuring that her weapon was ready and her communication gear was functioning properly. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders as she realized that the success or failure of the entire rescue mission might depend on the intelligence she gathered in the next hour. Everything she had trained for throughout her military career was about to be tested in the crucible of actual combat. She signaled Kim to follow her as she began moving toward the enemy patrol, using natural terrain features to mask their approach while maintaining visual contact with Martinez's overwatch position. The ground was treacherous underfoot, with loose rocks that could create noise and unstable surfaces that threatened to send them tumbling down the mountainside. As they crept closer to the enemy position, Maya could hear voices speaking in a local dialect that she didn't recognize. The tone and rhythm suggested routine communication rather than urgent tactical coordination, indicating that the patrol was conducting standard reconnaissance rather than responding to immediate threats. This gave her confidence that their own movement had not been detected. Maya positioned herself behind a cluster of large rocks that provided concealment while offering a clear view of the enemy patrol. Through her binoculars, she could now see individual weapons, equipment configurations, and tactical procedures that would be valuable intelligence for planning the rescue assault. She began systematically documenting everything she observed, creating a detailed picture of enemy capabilities and vulnerabilities. The patrol leader appeared to be an experienced fighter based on his equipment and the deference shown by other patrol members. He carried a modern assault rifle with advanced optics, suggesting access to sophisticated weapons that could pose significant threats to the rescue force. His tactical vest was loaded with extra ammunition and what appeared to be explosives or grenades. Kim set up his communication equipment and began transmitting real-time intelligence reports to the command center and rescue force. Maya could hear his whispered descriptions of enemy positions and movements being relayed to soldiers, who would use that information to plan their assault routes and tactical approaches. "Command, this is Recon 1, Kim spoke quietly into his microphone. "We have visual confirmation of organized enemy patrol conducting surveillance operations. 4 personnel with advanced weapons and communication equipment. They appear to be part of a larger coordinated defensive network." Maya continued studying the enemy patrol while monitoring radio communications for any indication that their presence had been detected. The intelligence she was gathering painted a picture of sophisticated enemy organization that exceeded what anyone had anticipated based on previous engagements in the area. Suddenly, one of the enemy fighters turned in their direction and appeared to be staring directly at their concealed position. Maya froze, barely breathing as she watched the hostile soldier scan the terrain where she and Kim were hidden. Long seconds passed as the fighter studied the landscape, his weapon ready and his attention focused on potential threats. Kim noticed the danger and stopped his radio transmission, understanding that any sound or movement could expose their position and trigger a firefight that would compromise the entire mission. Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she waited to see whether their concealment would hold, or whether they were about to face their first combat engagement. The enemy fighter eventually looked away and rejoined his patrol, apparently satisfied that the area was clear of immediate threats. Maya exhaled slowly, realizing how close they had come to being discovered and potentially killed before accomplishing their mission objectives. The experience gave her a visceral understanding of combat stress that no amount of training could have provided. "That was too close," Kim whispered, his face pale with the realization of how narrowly they had avoided detection. Maya nodded, while continuing to observe the enemy patrol through her binoculars. "Stay focused on the mission. We need to gather as much intelligence as possible before they move out of visual range." Over the next 30 minutes, Maya documented detailed information about enemy weapons, communication procedures, and movement patterns that revealed important tactical vulnerabilities. She observed that the patrol members were not maintaining proper security during their reconnaissance, creating opportunities for surprise attacks that could disrupt their defensive network. Kim established contact with Martinez and confirmed that she maintained overwatch of their position while continuing to monitor for additional enemy forces in the area. The tactical coordination between team members was functioning exactly as Maya had envisioned during her mission planning, with each person contributing specialized skills to accomplish objectives that none of them could have achieved individually. "Recon 1, this is QRF Leader," Morrison's voice crackled through Kim's radio equipment. "Your intelligence reports are enabling us to identify safe approach routes. We're preparing to begin our advance in 30 minutes. Can you maintain observation of enemy positions during our movement?" Maya felt a surge of pride and responsibility as she realized that her team's work was directly contributing to the rescue mission's success. The intelligence they had gathered was being used by experienced infantry soldiers to plan tactical movements that could save the lives of everyone trapped at Outpost Phoenix. "QRF Leader, this is Recon 1, Maya responded through Kim's radio. "We can maintain observation and provide real-time updates on enemy positions. Be advised that hostile forces are better organized and equipped than initial estimates suggested." As Maya spoke, she noticed new movement on the ridgeline that caused her blood to run cold. Additional enemy fighters were emerging from concealed positions, revealing a defensive network that was far more extensive than anyone had anticipated. Instead of the small patrol they had been observing, Maya realized they were looking at elements of a much larger force that had been waiting in ambush positions. "Contact, contact, contact," Maya whispered urgently into the radio. "Multiple enemy personnel emerging from concealed positions. Estimated strength, 20 to 30 fighters with heavy weapons. This is not a reconnaissance patrol. This is a prepared ambush position." The tactical situation had suddenly become exponentially more dangerous as Maya realized that the rescue force was about to advance into a carefully prepared kill zone. Everything depended on her ability to provide accurate intelligence that would allow Morrison's soldiers to avoid the trap that enemy forces had spent hours or days preparing. Martinez's voice came through the radio with controlled urgency. "Recon 1, I count multiple weapon positions being manned along the entire ridgeline. They've got overlapping fields of fire that would devastate any force moving through the valley." Maya felt the weight of dozens of lives settling on her shoulders as she understood that her next decisions could determine whether the rescue mission succeeded or ended in catastrophic failure. The enemy had anticipated their approach and prepared defenses that could destroy both the rescue force and the survivors at Outpost Phoenix. "Kim, get me direct communication with command immediately," Maya ordered. "We need to alert them that the entire tactical situation has changed." As Kim worked to establish communication links, Maya continued studying the enemy positions through her binoculars, desperately looking for weaknesses or vulnerabilities that could be exploited to break up the ambush before it claimed American lives. Her training and analytical skills were about to face the ultimate test as she tried to find solutions to a tactical problem that could determine the fate of everyone involved in the rescue mission. The forgotten soldier who had fought so hard for the opportunity to prove herself was now facing a moment that would define not only her own future, but the survival of the soldiers who had trusted her expertise enough to approve her unconventional mission. Maya identified a narrow gap in the enemy defensive line where overlapping fields of fire created a brief window of vulnerability. If the rescue force could time their movement precisely and coordinate with suppressive fire from her team's position, they might be able to exploit that weakness and break through the ambush before enemy forces could respond effectively. "Command, this is Recon 1. Maya spoke into Kim's radio with the calm precision of someone whose training had prepared her for exactly this moment. "I have identified a potential breach point in enemy defenses. Recommend immediate coordination between rescue force and our position to execute synchronized assault." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's voice came through the static with obvious tension. "Recon 1, explain your tactical assessment and recommended course of action." Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would commit dozens of soldiers to a course of action based entirely on her judgment and analytical capabilities. Everything she had learned throughout her military career was about to be tested in the most consequential way possible. "Sir, enemy forces have established interlocking fields of fire designed to channel our rescue force into predetermined kill zones. However, I've identified a covered approach that could allow a small assault element to establish flanking positions while the main force provides diversionary attacks." As Maya outlined her tactical plan, she could hear the intensity in her own voice and realized that she was no longer the overlooked logistics specialist who had been dismissed and marginalized for years. She had become a combat leader whose expertise and judgment were being trusted by senior commanders facing life and death decisions. Martinez's rifle cracked with sudden violence, the sharp report echoing across the mountainside as she engaged an enemy fighter who had detected their position. The sound triggered immediate chaos as hostile forces began returning fire while searching for the source of the attack that had killed one of their comrades. Contact left, Martinez called out as she worked the bolt on her rifle and acquired a new target. "Enemy fighters are maneuvering toward our position. We need to move immediately or we'll be surrounded." Maya felt the transition from intelligence gathering to active combat with startling clarity as bullets began impacting the rocks around their position. Everything changed in an instant from careful observation to desperate fighting for survival against enemies who were now fully aware of their presence and location. Kim grabbed his radio equipment while returning fire with his carbine, trying to maintain communication links while engaging hostile targets that were advancing from multiple directions. Maya could see muzzle flashes from enemy positions as fighters attempted to suppress her team while maneuvering closer for decisive attacks. "Command, Recon 1 is engaged," Maya reported while firing controlled bursts at advancing enemy soldiers. "We're providing targeting information for immediate fire. Support missions. Enemy positions are marked by our engagement area." The radio crackled with urgent transmissions as the rescue force began their coordinated assault, using intelligence from Maya's team to time their movement with the chaos created by the firefight. Maya could hear the distant thunder of helicopters approaching as air support finally became available to support the ground operation. Martinez shifted position and engaged new targets with methodical precision, her sniper rifle eliminating enemy fighters who were trying to establish supporting positions for the advancing assault. Each shot was carefully aimed and devastatingly effective, disrupting enemy coordination and creating opportunities for Maya and Kim to maneuver. Maya found herself moving and fighting with instincts she had never known she possessed, her training finally being tested in the ultimate arena, where mistakes meant death and success meant survival. She engaged targets with her carbine while directing Kim's movement and maintaining communication with friendly forces, who were depending on her intelligence and coordination. The sound of American helicopters grew louder as attack aircraft arrived to provide close air support for the rescue operation. Maya could see rocket impacts along the ridgeline as enemy positions were systematically destroyed by precision strikes guided by intelligence her team had gathered during hours of careful observation. "QRF leader, this is Recon 1, Maya called into her radio while reloading her weapon. "We're marking enemy positions with tracer fire. Recommend immediate assault through the breach point we identified." Morrison's response came through the static with obvious gratitude and relief. "Recon 1, your intelligence is spot on. We're moving through the gap and establishing positions to support Phoenix extraction. Outstanding work." Maya felt a surge of vindication and pride as she realized that her unconventional mission was succeeding beyond everyone's expectations. The overlooked logistics specialist had become a combat leader whose expertise was directly contributing to saving lives and accomplishing objectives that conventional approaches had failed to achieve. As the firefight continued around her, Maya understood that she had finally proven everything she had always believed about herself. Size and gender were irrelevant when measured against skill, determination, and the courage to act when action was needed most. The forgotten soldier had stepped into the spotlight of combat and emerged as exactly the kind of leader the military needed in its most challenging moments. The rescue of Outpost Phoenix was succeeding, and Maya Chen had played an essential role in that success through intelligence, leadership, and combat performance that exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. She had faced the ultimate test and proven that expertise earned through dedication and preparation mattered more than the physical and social barriers that had held her back for years. In the chaos of combat, Maya had finally found her place as a soldier and leader whose contributions were not only recognized, but essential to mission success. The small woman who had been told she was too weak to fight had just helped save dozens of lives through courage, intelligence, and combat skills that proved her critics completely wrong. 6 months after the rescue at Outpost Phoenix, Maya Chen stood before a packed auditorium at Fort Benning, her uniform crisp with new Sergeant First Class stripes gleaming on her sleeves. The Silver Star Medal rested against her chest, a tangible reminder of the day she had proven that courage came in all sizes. Behind her, a projection screen displayed tactical diagrams and photographs from the mission that had changed everything. The audience consisted of infantry officers, special operations personnel, and senior command staff who had come to hear firsthand accounts of unconventional tactics that had saved 37 lives in a single operation. Maya's presentation had become required viewing for advanced infantry courses, her methods now studied as examples of adaptive leadership under extreme pressure. Colonel Morrison, recently promoted after his own heroic actions during the Phoenix rescue, introduced Maya with genuine warmth in his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to present Sergeant First Class Maya Chen, whose tactical innovations and combat leadership have fundamentally changed how we approach reconnaissance operations in complex terrain." Maya stepped to the podium with confidence that had been earned through fire and blood rather than bestowed by rank or position. The nervousness that had once plagued her public speaking had been replaced by the quiet authority of someone who had faced death and emerged victorious through skill and determination. "The key lesson from Phoenix isn't about proving doubters wrong," Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. "It's about recognizing that effective leadership can emerge from unexpected places when we create opportunities for people to demonstrate their capabilities rather than limiting them based on assumptions. She clicked to a slide showing the terrain around Outpost Phoenix, the same map she had studied obsessively during those long nights when everyone assumed she was simply managing supply inventories. The audience leaned forward with obvious interest as she explained how detailed analysis had revealed tactical opportunities that conventional reconnaissance had missed. The enemy expected us to follow standard assault procedures because that's what they had prepared to counter, Maya continued. By approaching the problem from a logistics perspective and thinking about terrain as supply routes rather than just fighting positions, we identified vulnerabilities that were invisible to traditional tactical planning. In the front row, Maya noticed Lieutenant Colonel Harrison nodding approvingly as she described decision-making processes that had seemed reckless at the time, but had proven devastatingly effective in execution. His support during her most difficult moments had been crucial to her success, and his willingness to trust unconventional approaches had saved lives. Maya's presentation detailed how small reconnaissance teams could provide intelligence that transformed tactical situations when properly integrated with larger operations. She emphasized that the Phoenix rescue had succeeded not because of individual heroics, but because of coordinated teamwork that leveraged everyone's unique capabilities. Specialist Martinez's marksmanship eliminated key enemy personnel at critical moments, Maya explained, highlighting her team members' contributions. Corporal Kim's communication skills ensured that intelligence reached decision-makers when it could influence tactical outcomes. Success came from combining different skill sets rather than relying on any single capability. After her presentation, Maya was approached by Captain Lisa Brennan, a company commander who had been following her career with obvious interest. Brennan commanded an elite reconnaissance unit that specialized in the kind of deep penetration missions Maya had pioneered during the Phoenix operation. "Sergeant Chen," Brennan said with professional respect, "I'd like to discuss opportunities for you to join my unit. We're developing new doctrine for small team operations, and your experience would be invaluable for training the next generation of reconnaissance specialists." Maya felt a surge of satisfaction as she realized that the assignment she was being offered represented everything she had worked toward throughout her military career. No longer would she be fighting for recognition or opportunities to prove her capabilities. Her expertise was now sought after by elite units that valued results over appearances. "Ma'am, I'd be honored to contribute to that mission," Maya replied. "The Phoenix operation showed me that small teams can achieve significant tactical impacts when they're properly trained and equipped." As they discussed details of potential assignments, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The logistics specialist who had been dismissed as too small for combat operations had become a recognized expert whose methods were being studied and replicated throughout the military. First Sergeant Kane approached as her conversation with Captain Brennan concluded, his expression showing the kind of respect that had to be earned rather than demanded. The man who had once been her most vocal opponent had become one of her strongest supporters after witnessing her performance under fire. "Chen," Kane said with obvious pride, "I owe you an apology for doubting your capabilities. You proved me wrong in the best possible way by saving lives and accomplishing the mission when conventional approaches had failed." Maya appreciated Kane's acknowledgement, while understanding that his initial skepticism had been rooted in genuine concern for her safety rather than malicious intent to limit her opportunities. His transformation from opponent to advocate demonstrated how combat performance could change perspectives more effectively than any argument or presentation. "First Sergeant, your training and standards made me a better soldier even when I disagreed with your decisions," Maya replied diplomatically. "Everyone on the base contributed to the success at Phoenix, including people who challenged me to be better than I thought I could be." Kane smiled at her diplomatic response, While recognizing the underlying truth that harsh training and high standards had indeed prepared her for challenges that would have overwhelmed less rigorously prepared soldiers. The military's demanding environment had forged her into someone capable of extraordinary performance under extreme pressure. As the crowd began to disperse, Maya was approached by Torres, now wearing the stripes of a master sergeant and serving as the senior enlisted advisor for advanced tactics development. His role had evolved to include evaluating innovative approaches that could improve military effectiveness across different operational environments. "Maya," Torres said with familiar warmth, "I've been watching your career development with considerable satisfaction. You've gone from managing supply inventories to revolutionizing reconnaissance doctrine in less than a year. That's the kind of transformation that makes this job worthwhile." Maya felt grateful for Torres's early support during the most difficult periods of her career when advancement seemed impossible and recognition remained elusive. His willingness to provide challenging assignments and advocate for her capabilities had created opportunities that eventually led to her breakthrough moment. "Sergeant Torres, your guidance made all the difference during those early months when nobody seemed to notice what I was capable of," Maya said sincerely. "You gave me assignments that prepared me for opportunities I couldn't have imagined at the time." Torres nodded while reflecting on the broader implications of Maya's success for military personnel management and talent development. Her story had become a case study in identifying and developing unconventional capabilities that might otherwise remain unused despite their potential value. Later that evening, Maya sat in her new quarters reviewing assignment options that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Elite reconnaissance units, advanced tactics development positions, and instructor roles at prestigious military schools were now available to her based on demonstrated performance rather than traditional qualifications. She thought about the soldiers at Outpost Phoenix who had returned home to their families because unconventional thinking had broken through tactical problems that conventional approaches couldn't solve. Their survival gave meaning to her struggles against institutional barriers and validated her belief that expertise should be valued regardless of its source. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from Martinez, now assigned to an advanced marksmanship instruction unit where her skills were being used to train the next generation of military snipers. The message contained a simple thank you and a photograph of Martinez receiving a commendation for her instructional excellence. A similar message arrived from Kim, who had been selected for advanced communications training that would eventually lead to assignments with special operations units. His experience during the Phoenix mission had demonstrated capabilities that qualify him for highly specialized roles requiring both technical expertise and combat experience. Maya realized that the Phoenix rescue had transformed not only her own career but had created opportunities for everyone involved to advance based on demonstrated performance rather than traditional career progression patterns. The mission had proven that unconventional approaches could benefit everyone when they succeeded in accomplishing critical objectives. As she prepared for bed, Maya looked at the Silver Star medal resting on her dresser and remembered the weight of responsibility she had felt during those crucial hours when lives depended on her decisions. The recognition was gratifying, but the knowledge that her actions had saved lives remained the most meaningful aspect of her transformation. Maya Chen had evolved from a forgotten logistics specialist into a combat leader whose expertise was recognized and valued by the most elite units in the military. Her story had become an inspiration for other soldiers who felt marginalized or overlooked, proof that determination and competence could overcome institutional barriers when circumstances provided opportunities to demonstrate capability. The small woman who had been told she was too weak to fight had not only proven her critics wrong but had established new standards for what effective leadership looked like when it emerged from unexpected sources. Her legacy would influence military doctrine and personnel development for years to come. ensuring that future soldiers would have opportunities to contribute based on their abilities rather than limitations others placed on them. Maya's journey from the shadows of supply management to the forefront of tactical innovation represented more than personal achievement. It demonstrated that the military's greatest strength lay not in conformity to traditional expectations, but in its ability to recognize and develop excellence wherever it emerged, regardless of conventional assumptions about who could lead and fight effectively. The forgotten soldier had become unforgettable, her name now associated with courage, innovation, and the kind of leadership that saved lives when conventional approaches failed. Maya Chen had proven that true strength came not from physical size but from the determination to act when action was needed most, the intelligence to find solutions others missed, and the courage to risk everything for the sake of soldiers who depended on her expertise. Her story would continue inspiring future generations of military leaders who understood that the most effective warriors were often those who had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed by systems that valued appearance over capability. Maya had shattered those limitations forever, creating a legacy that would outlast any individual career or recognition. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.